Welcome to From Doubt to Destiny,
the podcast where dreams come alive. I'm Eden Ryder, the dream maker.
And I'm Stacie Trott, the queen maker. We're here to give your dreams the royal treatment that they deserve. Get ready to unlock your queen
and unleash her dreams.
Welcome back to From Doubt to Destiny. Every episode, we thank you for joining us. Every episode, we're going to have a framework of a topic. And today's topic is identity and labels. We're going to have a topic and we're going to discuss the tension, the transformative thoughts we've come up with around that, and then some takeaways, items that hopefully are action-oriented that you're going to go home and want to put some implementation of shift and change in your life. We are here for encouragement and empowerment, and hopefully this conversation will do that around this topic for you today. So, identity and labels. I'd like to think this is an easy topic, but I think it's weighted because as women, I will say we have many different hats, I call them. And I don't know, somehow I like analogies a lot. So I go from hats we wear to plates we're spinning. But they're all different ways to crystallize that sometimes we are being stretched and pulled in many different directions. I am in a season right now, which I would like to shift and change, where I am often doing at least two things at once. Sometimes three things. Yeah. Multitasking, which means each thing is probably not being done to its maximum efficiency. But to take a step back, identity and labels, I would like to say I have a very vivid, clear memory of 10 plus years ago. A very dear friend to me now, but he did not know me as well then, was introducing me. And I believe that he introduced me as a lawyer. And I cringed inside because I thought, why is he describing me by what I do? That's not who I am. And he meant no ill intention at all. But I cringed because that title is just a piece of a dimension of me. And if I was picking something I'd want to lead with, I talked about this in an earlier podcast, probably I think our first, Who the Heck Are We and Why Are We Here? And I said, I don't want to be defined by what I do. And if I got to choose, I would describe and define myself as a woman of faith. That's the foundation. So identity and labels I have a probably charged relationship with, even though I love some of my labels and I do identify with some of these labels. I think the charge for me is around not wanting someone else to define me by them and being able to define myself. And I almost wish that if someone was introducing me, they would ask, this is Stacie. How would you like to introduce yourself? Yeah. I don't know if anyone's ever done that, but that's almost what I'd like, because then I get to lead with with how I'd like to be introduced or how I want to be thought of. And maybe it'll change depending on the room that I'm in, right? Or the season that I'm in, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But when I was thinking about this topic and how we were going to discuss it, I was forced to acknowledge and recognize we live in a capitalist society, and therefore most of the time people start with the identity of you by what you do. So what's your relationship with identity and labels?
It's interesting. At first I was like, oh, I don't know if I have like an issue with this. But then I think, and actually it's literally just coming to me, I think I actually realized I had more of an issue with it when I made the decision to stay at home with my daughter, which is something, I mean, my entire life had always been a goal of mine. So it was like a dream come true. But then I noticed when I was filling out forms and it says like occupation and like title and like all of these things, I'm like, do I write like stay-at-home mom? And then like immediately like judgments that had come up that I don't actually have. I was like, I'm living like a dream in a way of what I want to do, but like just comments people have made.
Yeah.
And it makes me go through of like, well, what does that mean? And then I'm so like,
what'd you put on the form?
It like would change. Like you just said, I'm like, I think today I'm embracing it, to the next day, like I'm in the process of building a business. So I was like self-employed. Like I would literally change like what it is I would put, because I realized there is so much weight, or I guess as a society, especially like capitalism, we put so much weight it is on what you do that just that initial interaction or even being asked that, and even like you said, depending on the circles I'm in, I'm very well aware there's so much weight on it that I'm like, oh, it's gonna like either direct the conversation based on how I answer this. And then sometimes like if I use the stay-at-home mom, or like currently being home, like that's gonna go in a good direction, or it's like, should I say I'm not sure, like, but why am I like twisting and like going in knots of like distorting? So I'm realizing in you asking me, I think I've had more of a, I don't know, like a relationship with it. Yeah. Whereas prior to that, I didn't feel like.
I was just going to say, when you were an event planner,
it didn't really,
you didn't think about it at all.
No.
Because that was a respected description of an occupation.
Right.
So it just flowed right out. And then when it became, I'm Zaria's mom, essentially,
which I'm proud of,
correct, but was like, that enough? You had to think, was there enoughness in it? Correct.
Yes.
Do they think I'm at home painting my toenails and watching novelas? And so and that's why I think there's so much of a rejection against them in this season or space of life. So first you're like, no, I'm good with this, and they're like, well, maybe I'm not good with it, and it all depends. It's interesting, this is coming up for me now, and I didn't think I was gonna go there on this, but when I was married, divorced, and remarried to the same man, but the 2.0 version of him. Thank God, praise Jesus. And but one of the things I struggled with when we were separated was, what box do I check? Yeah. I'm still married, but we're not together and we're living apart. So I check single, but I'm married. But I'm like, and some boxes had separated, and I'm like, do I want to check separated? Why is this form asking me so much about my personal life? And I would go through that whole thing in like 90 seconds while I'm trying to go to the doctor. Right. And so it's like labels show up sometimes in a way that we don't think about at all. And then depending on what we're going through and where we are, it's like, ooh, I don't know if I want. Yes. So here I'm just trying to go to the doctor, and I can't fill out these daggone forms because I'm not sure how much of my personal life I want to expose or disclose while I'm just trying to get my blood pressure checked. It's just like, and it's going to be high after I finish filling out these forms. So it's a very interesting thing. And so I think the answer is, there's definitely a tension with them. Mm-hmm. If you have never had tension with an identity or a label, good for you. Yeah. I don't know many women that have not had a tension around it. So I would say there's definitely tension. And one of the things that we identified is, while I just want to go, screw it, get rid of the identities and the labels. We need them in our society for communication, for language and functioning. We need things to be labeled in order to be able to effectively interact with other humans. And so then the question is, how do we utilize labels and identity in a way that is empowering as opposed to triggering? Yeah. Or restrictive. Yeah. And so how do we do that? I don't know. I think one of them is, I just had the idea when I said to you, it's like, maybe when I'm introducing someone going forward, let them define who they are. Probably the first time someone does that, that's going to maybe be uncomfortable because you're not prepared for it. But it's the word I want to say is like a titillating thought that someone would give you the opportunity to frame yourself the way that you would like, as opposed to picking how you've basically encapsulated them and using that, and now you're presenting them to someone else as like the way you choose to think of them, versus letting them lead with however they want to be in that moment. So I would say one transformational thought I've just had is, when I'm introducing someone, outside of saying their name, I think I want to say, what would you like to tell this person that I'm introducing to you about yourself?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking of it in like, typically that happens in more of like business settings or corporate settings,
right.
or, you know, how someone's like, you know, networking event, those types of things. And instead of being like, they're such and such, it's like, what do you want to lead with? And giving them that empowering opportunity to self-select what they want to say.
Yeah, no, I love
themselves.
that.
I might want to be like, I'm Christian's mom today, right? And even that is interesting because like, if you're at a dinner party or a networking event and everybody responds with the typical, like, I'm a IP attorney or I'm a,
right.
you know, orthodontist, then you can just like skip all that and just let the person identify themselves the way they want to. And I'm almost like quirky enough now to be like, let me come up with interesting ways to identify myself going forward so I can kind of throw the audience off a little bit. But so how do you feel about identity and labels in a transformative way that allows them to be, instead of restrictive and not comprehensive, empowering?
I think for me, I'm on this big right now of like giving myself permission versus like asking for it, or like, again, in the shoulding and all of that. So
what's the shoulding, Eden? So no, honestly, the people who are watching this episode, if they don't want, what is it to have someone should on you?
Like when you find yourself saying like, well, I should be doing this because they, and like in the days, like,
well, who is they?
Yes. It drives my husband nuts. Like when
shoulds and the
parenting stuff, when I'm like, they say this and they say that. So when that's happening, I like that I can define it myself. So like giving myself permission that use the labels and the identities, like when it feels empowering,
yeah,
or when there is like a very intentional purpose behind it.
Yep.
But then also realizing I can also not take them off, because I'm not saying like, okay, like I'm not this, but that I'm also so much more than this and I can expand upon it. Mm-hmm. So I know one time, like talking to our therapist, but in a session with him, like I was saying how I felt like at times it's like, if I kind of like start comparing and judging my labels or my titles. So I'll be like, I'll have a day where I was like, wow, I was like a really good mom today and I was a pretty good wife, but like I really sucked at like working on my business, or you know what I mean? Like every day it's like a running checklist, or I'm like, today, like I did really good at like the house is clean. It feels like this. I didn't do any self-care. Like I was always constantly analyzing and saying like, there just doesn't seem to be the time and space for all the labels for me to feel like I'm doing like each label like the justice it deserves, I guess.
So can I reframe that and say, or frame it in what how I'm hearing is, you couldn't get A's hundreds across the board.
Exactly. Yes. I could like, it was always like, it felt like 2 or 3 out of 4. And then one was kind of like falling to the wayside. And he just said something like that. Now I feel like is now like my guiding light of more like everything is serving a greater purpose.
Yep.
So like Eden, like the wife, Eden, the mom, Eden, the entrepreneur, Eden, the being, like all of that is serving this greater purpose, and they're all like, it's all intertwined.
Yeah.
So like a win in one area is
a win for the whole team.
Yes. So like not breaking it down like that, and not putting, again, that much pressure on yourself of like, because I think at times the labels and the identities is what causes that separation within yourself. Yeah. And then also to others at times. Like I think sometimes when we label things, there's an empowering of like women, like there is things that can happen where like when you bring a group of people together and you identify them as something, it can be uplifting. Yes. But then I think sometimes when you start doing that too much, you're separating yourself, like even within women. And then we want to like get into race and or like this, or like demographics, or like how much money do you make? Like, you know what I mean? Like if you start like breaking these things down more and more and more, you're just creating that
fraction.
Yes. And that separation. So I've found ways that the labels have done it to myself, where I feel like I'm fractioning off myself, or I'm fractioning off myself from others, where when I'm seeing others, rather than feeling that connectedness, or like at the end of the day, like we all have these emotions. We all just want to be like seen, heard, loved. You can start feeling like you're so much different, or like we don't have this in common. Yeah. So I think for me, the biggest like transformation is use them when you want to and when it feels good and it's empowering. And there's times where like, you know what, like none of those work right now. Like I am Eden, I'm just being like, you know what I mean? Like, or I'm even beyond the label right now. Like I think
I'm above the label.
I'm above the label. Like I think even right now, like with our first episode, like you brought up, like I haven't come up with, it's like I've used 2 words. Like I don't even know it's not a thing yet. I can't put it on a plaque yet. Like I'm more, I think it's like the being of it, and it's not like.
I would love to walk into or be at a networking event and someone say, you know, what do you do? And not want to answer that question.
Right.
Almost like, I enjoy reading books, or say something that's like, you know, not the answer that they were looking for, just to buck up against the system of, I don't mind sharing with you what I do for a living, but I don't want you to compartmentalize me or make assumptions about me based on how I answer this question. Can we not do that?
Right.
So I 100% agree. I love the idea of it all serving the greater, larger being and purpose, and not evaluating yourself with a report card at the end of the day and looking for where you failed instead of celebrating that I was a really great mom today. And because I was a really great mom today, I was a really great Eden today. And that's enough.
Yes.
The enoughness. I think we're going to have an episode just called Enoughness.
We're going to need like a dictionary.
Yeah. I think we did get a definition. I think I have one here for enoughness. And I'm like, I think I want to at some point make sure, it's a word, it's a thing, it's in the dictionary. We didn't create it, but we are going to use it, enoughness. So I love the idea of, you also said, I think you didn't say it, but I was thinking, you said use it when it's empowering. Or lose it when it's not,
throw it away.
Right? Throw it away, toss it out. It doesn't work. So, and having these conversations with other friends and coworkers and colleagues and other entrepreneurs, we can start a movement around, don't start with what do you do?
Yes.
I would love to get through an entire networking event or a dinner party and not have someone ask me what I do for a living. Like, what are you reading right now?
Right.
What are you watching?
Or if it could be like the last question. By the way, like I never even got to ask. Like, what is it that you, I
did appreciate today. When we were getting our makeup done, my makeup artist didn't ask me what I do until we were like 50 minutes in. We were just talking about life and things, and there was no, I need to know what you do in order to know how to relate to you, how to interact with you, how to talk to you. And so I really appreciated that by the time it came up, it was just like, oh, that's a nice little factoid about you. Right. But I already liked you like before I learned that. Correct. Outside of that. So one of the things I thought about, which is an amazing experience that I had, is I'll just be more generic. I was at an event where the featured speaker walked around the room and asked people, who are you? And I was in a room full of a lot of lawyers. And so people were like, I'm an IP lawyer, and I'm a litigator, and I'm all these different types of lawyers. And she kept saying, okay, but who are you? And then people went to like, okay, I'm a mother, and I'm a father, and it was really awkward for the first probably few minutes where people were trying to kind of lead with the obvious. And what she was digging into is, have you ever sat to figure out who you are and how you want to be defined and what's interesting about you? The way I crystallized it, or my takeaway from it, was, what's your superpower? If there was something you needed to, if I could only remember one thing about you, what is it? Tell me what that is when someone asks who are you? And I remember everything. I remember nothing that anyone said in the room. I remember no responses other than one gentleman who said, and I know him personally, but he said, I'm a closer. Simple sentence, super clean. It was one word. And he was like, I'm a closer. And I was like, yes. Now, he was in the third of his life. So he's had a lot of time to figure out who he is in a way where he could succinctly. He also had the benefit of being like the 6th or 7th person that she asked. So he had some time to kind of see where she was going, where she was getting at. But it was a fascinating experience to have. And it's part of what allows me to go into this space of thinking identity and labels. I get to choose them. I get to define them. It forced me to think, okay, if I'm ever in a room like that again and I'm the first one, I want an answer.
Yeah.
And I want a good one. And not good by anyone else's standards, good in that it feels authentic in my bones. And so now I would say I'm a queen maker, right. Because it's interesting. And if I heard that and I didn't know the backstory, I'd be like, what does that mean?
Right.
And like fascinated by it. Correct. Curious. And then there's so much I can talk about. None of it having to do primarily with being a lawyer, right? So that's what I think is so interesting about using identities and labels as a superpower. So I think we've already kind of touched on, we can have a transformative, positive relationship with identities and labels by using it when it works for us and makes us feel good, by not evaluating ourselves based on them.
Or others, yeah.
And others. And then also by completely disassociating from them when it is not serving us. A different way, and I don't know if I've talked about this on another episode, but I have a friend who I was kvetching to one day, and we've known each other for like 30 plus years, and I said, oh, this and that, and she's like, okay, great on all the kvetching and the complaining, how'd you win today? And I was like, I don't want to talk about how I won today. I want to talk about all the things that didn't go right. And she's like, nope, how did you win today? And ever since she's asked me that, it's kind of like, instead of evaluating, okay, was I a good mother? Was I a good wife? Was I a good lawyer? Was I a good sister? Was I a good friend? It's impossible to be good at all those things each day anyway. But what I win at. And if you just do the wins list, you're going to have things on it, at least one. And then you can go, okay, I won today. And now you're going into the end of your day or into your night and your sleep and your rest with a positive outlook on yourself versus I am still very much shifting into this space. I would often go to sleep feeling like, okay, there's so much more I need to do, but I can't anymore. So now I'm unplugging because I'm exhausted, not because I'm finished.
Right.
And I'm failing because I'm not finished, but I don't have any more in me. So I'm going to rest, but more because I have to, not because I want to or because I deserve it. And it was this whole wrestle. It's probably why I probably haven't slept well in a number of years.
Then you bring that, you're literally going to wake up in the same state.
Correct.
You then marinated on it for however long you
slept.
Correct. Yeah.
Correct. How I went to sleep and what was on my mind was this feeling of not enoughness because I was taking every label, every title, running it through and giving myself a check or a minus.
Yeah.
And it's just enough of that, enough of the labels, enough of wrapping my identity and needing to be perfect. Hundreds across the board. No longer, not necessary. So I am probably in a transformational place with identities, with my identities and my labels. And I say them in plurality because you show up in rooms. Like when I'm in a room and I'm a daughter, that's a different room.
Yeah.
But it's literally like you can be multiple things at once. I was having dinner with a group of boss ladies, and one of them shared that she and her husband have a rule when they go out on date night, can't talk about work or the kids. Yeah. And she said some nights she's like, it's hard. And it's like forcing you to go into those other spaces that you want to oxygenate. But how do you get to them when you're spending so much time on certain other buckets? So I think it's a beautiful rule. I haven't shared that yet with my husband to say, I think we need to incorporate this.
Yeah.
No, we kind of we take date night and be like, okay, what are all the things that we haven't talked about that we need to talk about? And it's like, no, how about we just like be and do and not everything that's responsibilities, save that for tomorrow. And so how do you invigorate the relationship when you're spending the time talking about responsibilities and action items and to-do lists? What do the kids need, etc.? So I say my takeaway is we should be labelless.
Yeah.
And I think we should abandon them. There was something else that I was going to talk about. I don't know if we have time, which is, and I don't want to butcher this, but there's an author. Her name is Luvvie Jones. This is just kind of a takeaway of kind of a way to look at it. Yeah, something you can do, an action item and something that's empowering, because a big overarching purpose for this podcast is empowerment and encouragement for endurance for women, right? So here's something I came across recently that is empowering. there's a woman, an author named Luvvie Jones, and she's written a book called Professional Troublemaker. I'm in the process of listening to it as we speak, so I don't have it all fully down, but I might butcher the name here, but there's something called an oríkì or an oríkì. That is something, I have the definition here, so let me just make sure I read it correctly so I don't botch it. Okay, so the definition of an oríkì is a greeting that praises you through your kinship and speaks life to your destiny. And as soon as I saw the word destiny, I'm like, gotta talk about this for a second. It's a way to come. There's a certain structure to it. We'll include a link to her site where she gives you an example of the oríkì that she wrote for herself, and then how you can come up the frame and the structure for it. She's explained it, so I don't need to. I'm just gonna say that if you're curious, go to the show notes, follow the link, write your own oríkì, sit down. Eden and I are working on, it's on our to-do list to write our own. It's basically something, just to repeat what's in it, it's a greeting that praises you through your kinship and speaks life to your destiny. It's basically, I would say my own interpretation of it is coming up with these things about you that you are proud of, that are bold, that make you feel empowered, and putting it together in a very specific framework and style that is spelled out for you in her example of how to write your own, that I would say you, after you've put it together, you memorize it. Mm-hmm. I would even dare say, put it somewhere where you can see it all the time. I'd say, have it printed and frame it, and start to use it as something you can put on your wall of, when I forget who I am, my oríkì is supposed to remind me not just of who I am today, but the destiny that I'm called to and the spaces and places I'm supposed to go. It's supposed to speak to now and future together. So we encourage you to write your own oríkì. At some point, we'll write our own and share them with the audience. We'll have to find a way to make sure that's highlighted up front so you know the episode that has that. But in the space of, I can't think of a better way to be empowered than writing something that is literally praising who you are and your destiny. So if there was, we're not going to do the developmental journey D's today, because I think we're still in an evolving journey around thinking differently around our identity and labels. But we're going to do our own oríkis and see how we can kind of get that standing up a little taller. There are some days where I'm feeling like, and other days I'm like, you forget who you are. So I think once we have ours, share them with a friend, put them in places where you can be encouraged by them. And the last thing I'll say is, there was a time where whenever I was kind of like a little like kind of saying things that were low, I remember George would always say to me, my husband say, tell me 3 things you're grateful for.
Always works, yes, to go to gratitude.
Well, and I would hate when he would do that, because it was pulling me out of this headspace I was in, and I kind of wanted to stay. I was kind of enjoying my little pit, my hole, and every time he did it, it pulled me out of it, because even if I didn't want to, and then it became, tell me 3 things you're grateful for, and they have to be different than the last 3 that you gave me. And then I'm like, oh, because you can just be like, very basic things, my family, my health, my job, the ends. And it's like, no, dig deeper. And so with the labels and the identity, we can get lost. And so if I was going to say one other takeaway, it would be write your own oríkì, and remember when you've kind of lost yourself, you're lost in the sauce. I would say, remember 3 things that you're grateful for, and try to do 3 different ones each time, because there's lots to be grateful for. Anything you want to add to that, Eden?
I think one interesting thing that it actually just happened this morning, and it's just very with everything we're saying. I did a meditation this morning, and it was just like, it happened to be the meditation of the day, like on like the Deepak Chopra app. And it was about being, and I didn't actually think it was gonna have anything to do with this, to be honest, but in it talks about like, we are called human beings and like not human like doings, and how the I am comes up, and how typically if I ask you, which he does in it, like, who are you? He was like, the default is your brain is probably going to automatically start thinking and running that story. So it's going to go to stories and labels. So what if instead of your brain like running that and like going back through your stories. If you turn that off, so it like had you first say like your name. So say like, I am Eden Ryder. And then after that, say like, I am Eden. And then after that, you just say like, I am. And then like sitting with it and just being, and like, how are you like, how do you feel? Like,
minus the labels.
Minus the labels. And I just thought that was very interesting because I can't say, obviously I've heard of like I am and like I know that, but the stillness of it.
You've heard the I am, and I'm assuming in the context of God. That's what I'm thinking.
Exactly.
I
like
am
God,
that I am.
And yes, and or even like that and like the connectedness of it, if you take off all those labels, it made me think, but then also that stillness of like, again, like getting rid of all those labels, like untying yourself from it. And like, if you take all that away and don't go to the stories, don't go to all those like identities and just like sit with like how you're feeling and allow all that to kind of start melting away, like the clarity I think that can come from that stillness. And it was just interesting that it happened to be literally this
Today.
morning.
Well, before we talk about this topic,
so
I think that's really fantastic. Sitting with just who are you without the labels.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's almost like,
but like stop, don't even
do you
think
mean by
about
that?
it.
Right. What do you mean
It's
by
like
that? Like, yeah, correct.
Intuitive.
And it's
but,
intentional.
Right.
The way I'm thinking about it is like, sit with I am. And if you were going to fill in something behind it, don't think it, feel it.
Yes, exactly.
That's how I was processing what you're
Yes.
saying. And for most of us, I think the just the thought of doing that made me feel like I could get very close and connected to things that are authentically who I am, and that I don't know that I'm ever asked that question. Right? Like when someone says, who are you? I'm fill in the blank. My name comes out,
Right, those
my job
stories
comes
start-
out. And you keep talking, and there was no question of like, who am I at my core? So huge takeaway.
And I feel like it
Who am I
ties
at my core?
to that, like, who am I
Yeah.
uninterrupted? Like, I feel like
Correct.
that does tie into, like, you need to get still and go actually in and, like, really feel it out and just be. What do you, I don't remember. We said another one, but
being and becoming.
Yes. So,
The
like,
being and the becoming. I'm also thinking about something you just said around. I mean, I heard. I was listening to a podcast. Now I'm like, another podcast where the person was saying, someone asked them, if you had basically a little bit of time left to live, what would you do? And she said the answer was, I'd be doing what I'm doing right now.
which is ultimate. Yeah.
And I was like,
many
whoa,
people
that
can
one
say
hit
that?
me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think she's definitely in the third, I think, of her life. But she said, how sad is it if you answer the question with all these things that you have on a list somewhere, but you're not doing them now. We never know how much time we have. And so we have this dream of things we're going to get to at some point, someday later. And she's like, I'd be doing exactly what I'm doing right now. If I had 60 days left, I'm doing it. I'm already doing it. And I was like, I don't know if I could say that. So I think I got some work to do. But that's part of that, sitting with the who am I? And then if I can get in touch with what that is on the inside, and then the becoming, and getting connected with who does that person want to become?
Right.
Who does she want to grow into? What are her dreams? And if I'm not living them now, what do I need to change to get connected to them? So again, didn't think from this topic when we picked it that we would end up here, but I am very much grateful for being a participant in this conversation, and I hope you feel the same. This felt transformational for me. I think I had another aha moment. I got some homework to do. Hopefully you feel the same. So thank you for being with us today. Thank you for having another amazing conversation with me, Eden. Until next time. Remember to unlock your queen
and unleash her dreams.